Hello, my name is Beck and welcome to my November wrap-up. I'm going to be talking about all of the books that I have read during the month. I'll also link a couple of my reading vlogs as well, spoiler-free of course, to discuss what I read. So without further ado, let's jump straight into it. There are a bunch of saga volumes here, so I'm going to be talking through them. Volume 6, then Volume 7, Volume 8, and then also Volume 9 in preparation for the new release Volume 10 this year. And it's no surprise that for all of these I gave all of them 5-star ratings, but I'd like to talk about them really quickly and very generally, almost specifically volume to volume. Now I mentioned these before, but I also finished Volume 8 and this one centers the themes of family and breaking rules, but it also had themes of abortion in here and choices and how they can affect you and the people around you, which I really appreciate how heavy the topics can be in this series, but it's also handled with the gravity it deserves and the attention it needs. And that's why obviously I'm rereading them. And then we have this one, which was beautiful. The colors were incredible. The story was amazing, but this always breaks my heart. So much. It breaks my heart. I'm not going to elaborate and I will take no questions, but this breaks my heart so much. So with the massive cliffhanger in this series, I was like, I want to read Volume 10 as soon as it comes out, and that is what I did. And I would like to report that I also gave this 5 stars. And it also centers themes of responsibility and family, but also healing from trauma, no matter what age you are. Again, with those brilliant themes that are heartbreaking but very relatable in a real day sense, even though all of the characters in here are aliens and some of them have horns and wings. So it's cool to see magic and sci-fi presented in the story because it's escapism, but it's also very much grounded in those deep feelings of hurt, but also laughter and community and family. And so this series is just absolutely incredible. It's probably one of my favorite sci-fi series, if not it is my favorite sci-fi series, but then also I love Becky Chambers. So from wholesome to intense, apparently those are my only 2 sci-fi categories. Now I can't actually remember if I included this in my October wrap-up or not. I probably should have watched that before I sat down and filmed this, but no matter. I also finished Volume 3 of Lore Olympus and adored this one as well. And it discusses an event that happens in the first volume and it gives it also the gravity it deserves, and it fleshes out more of the characters. And obviously it focuses on Hades and Persephone and their budding relationship with each other and how vulnerable and trusting they are with each other. And I just love reading about them as a couple. They're probably one of my favorite literary couples ever. Again, I gave this 5 stars because I just love this series. And then I read another new release, and that is The Atlas Paradox by Olivia Blake. And The Atlas 6 came out this year as well, but earlier this year. And I've now read both, so I am up to date on the series. But this is very bright. I might end up putting a book cover in there instead of holding it up because it's going to mess with my camera. But I ended up giving this a 4 stars. And I can't go into too much detail because obviously with the sequel comes spoilers. But generally it's a dark academia book, and there are a group of characters that are kind of all handpicked by Atlas himself, who runs or is the headmaster of this school. And he handpicks them because they show high signs of intelligence and ability, like magical ability. And so he takes them to this school, but the school has this library within it, and they ask questions of the library. It produces magical answers, and they get to study almost like a thesis would be if you were in your honors levels or master's levels at university. So they get to go intense with their research, and their research is often making the philosophical, magical into reality. And I love seeing the discussion around that because it made all of the magic system feel like it was tangible, which is really cool. And I also really liked that the characters in this book, they managed to shift. And I think that's important for a series with making characters grow or regress or whatever they need to do. I think reading a book and then thinking these characters are my favorite, and then reading the sequel and going, actually, I don't like the same ones that I started with, but for different reasons. I think that's really smart. Obviously, this book is very clever as well. And it was complicated to read in the sense that I knew that I couldn't work an entire 8-hour day and then come home tired, work on the house, and then read. I had to just decide to read for a certain block of time and then shut everything else out, because it's a complicated book, but in a great way. And I just loved it. There was also a bit of a sapphic vibe in there at a certain point too, which I quite enjoyed. But that all said, I think the pacing and therefore some of the plots suffered a little bit in this book. The first book to me felt tighter and I gave it 4.5 stars, whereas with The Atlas Paradox, I gave it 4. So it felt like a bit more work for me to get through, but not because of the content being too complicated. It just felt like it was a slow undertaking, but I still enjoyed it regardless. I also did a reading vlog about The Atlas Paradox as well. And then I also reorganized my bookshelves within that reading vlog, the ones that you see behind me. So if you want to go and check that out, please do. I also did a read it or unhaul it vlog during November, and some of the books that I might talk about next might feature in that video, but I also started a book that has been taking me forever, and that is Senlin Ascends by Josiah Bancroft. And this is an adult fantasy about Senlin, and he goes to the Tower of Babel with his wife Maria, and when they get there, they're shopping in the market, and they turn their back, and then suddenly Maria is gone, and so is her luggage, and Senlin is left by himself, and he doesn't really know what has happened to her. And that is really as far as I got into the story. It's like 20 pages or so, so no spoilers are at all possible here. So I ended up putting this down. I DNF'd it. I DNF'd it for reasons that I also explained in my Booktuber favorites video, where I read favorite books on Booktube. I just didn't like Senlin as a character, and I felt the tone and the voice were not very palpable to my kind of reading, because I prefer reading about characters, and the characters really invigorate the story for me, and Senlin was alienating me and frustrating me rather than making me enjoy the work. It felt like the writing and the tone that the writer was going for was kind of overriding Senlin, because he felt like he was academic and up on a pedestal and looking down at everyone else. And this could become a story where Senlin is humbled, but I just don't really care about Senlin as a character, so there is no point to me sticking to this. So I DNF'd it. And then I have an accidental DNF just because I'm like out of sight, out of mind apparently. So I was reading the ebook of the Southern Book Club's Guide to Slaying Vampires. That is a title that I have had multiple attempts at trying to say in previous videos and just messed it up. So I read about 20% of this book, and I just forgot that it existed because I borrowed it as an ebook from my library, and then after 21 days, yes, I had it on loan for 21 days and I still somehow could not find time to read it. It just returned itself, and I didn't renew it because I forgot about it. But I was enjoying it, and it's about a book club set in the early 90s of these Southern women, and they talk about crime books, and then one day someone moves into their town or somebody is attacked in their town. Anyway, shenanigans ensue, and because they read and watch a lot of murder mystery thriller books, then they were like, well, let's solve something together. So that is the way it eventuates, but I didn't get far enough into it to kind of see all of that come to a head. What I did enjoy though was the atmosphere in it, because I felt like I was right there with them in the environments, in their houses, at the book club, in the weather as well. And then also that sense of just, you know, when you're reading a horror book and you're afraid to turn out the lights afterwards, this book nailed that tone absolutely. And I feel like I barely scratched the surface on it, which is my fault entirely because it just got returned. So eventually somewhere down the track, if I end up remembering, because clearly I'm trash, if I remember, then I will pick up this book again. But I did enjoy it for what it was so far. And I found the writing kind of ironic, not ironic, but more level and dry in a good way, because the humor is very blunt. But if you're looking for something with a bit more flair and excitement and pizzazz, again, like the Atlas Paradox, I found the pacing was a little bit of a drama for me. So I think that's partly why I also put it down, because it felt like I was slow reading it, but that might have also been contributed to the way the book was written. So take that as you will, but let me know if you liked that book, because I was sitting on about 3.5, 4 stars for it, and it was going up. And I just forgot about it. I'm so mad at myself. And then I am very proud of myself because I managed to pick up a book that I had previously put down, and then I finished it and I also enjoyed it, which is just something to celebrate in general. So I read Her Majesty's Royal Cupboard by Juno Dawson, and this is about witches in the modern day. And it's kind of like our world, but mildly adjacent. So it's not it exactly, but in the sense that witches exist, mundanes like normal people, they don't know that. And so the witches in this story are trying to recover from this war that happened about a decade ago, and there is a prophesized sullied child that is supposedly going to come back and overturn everything, and you get the witches and the warlocks as two factions. I think they were at war like a decade ago, and that's the reason that they don't really get along. But we follow a group of characters that you're introduced to as children at the very beginning. So there's, I'm probably not going to remember their names. There's Neve, she's the main character, at least I feel. There is another woman who is like the mother, but she's incredibly strong. Elle. There's Helena, and she runs Her Majesty's Royal Coven, which is like the government organization, I suppose you could call it, that not controls but keeps track of and keeps the witches kind of underway as a society, I mean. And who are the other characters? I swear there are more, but I read this in a few days and it's just done. But regardless, Neve was great. I really enjoyed the relationships and the understanding of queer inclusivity, and that there was a trans character in here and they were accommodated for, but there was also a lot of transphobia in here because one of the characters just doesn't think that this particular character is a witch, even though they obviously are. And so Juno Dawson is a trans author, and so she's really going to this place that is deeply relatable and also being very deliberately political, and I really liked that about it. It was hard in some places to read because it felt a little bit preachy, but at the same time it needed to be. So be aware of that going into it. There is trans violence in here, but there are also characters that fight tooth and nail for that character. So I'm going to leave it there because I don't want to spoil anything, but I liked it. I'm eager to continue. The hype is very much hyping up the ending. I wasn't entirely convinced by it, and I don't really like the ending that much. So based on my experiences of the book and the fact that I felt like it kept going on a little bit at the end when it probably should have wrapped up, I'm still interested to continue when the next book eventually comes out, because I think this is a 2022 release. So if it comes out maybe the same time next year, who knows? I'm going to be on board because I want to continue this series. I like what's been set up so far. And then I did that Read It, Unhaul It vlog that I mentioned before, and that's when I read this book. But then I was also currently reading something else during that vlog as well, and that is City of Stairs, and I got 40 pages into this. However, I got incredibly exciting book mail, and that is The Lost Metal by Brandon Sanderson, which is the last book in his Era 2 era. Why did I say that like I was from Texas or something? Era 2. It's his last Era 2 Mistborn book, and each time there is a Mistborn era, so there's 1 and 2 so far, but he's planning on releasing chunks of different eras, like hundreds of years in the future. So with the first set of Mistborn books, 300 years, then there's this series, and it's more like a Western cowboy thing, but still with the magics and the metals that were in book 1. So it's interesting to see that translated into a not modern time, but more modern. And then in the next series, I think it's going to be like around the 80s. And then in the next series after that, it's going to be sci-fi, like in space, which is really cool. That's what he seems to have projected anyway. So I'm really excited to get to this. And even though I didn't manage to do my reread this year, I think I'm just going to go straight into this anyway, because I've been waiting for this for several years, and it's by one of my favorite authors in one of the series that I love by him. So sorry, City of Stairs, but you're gonna have to wait. I'll put this down and pick it back up in December, but I am liking this, and I also discussed it in that vlog. So I think as far as everything goes, in November, I am still reading my audiobook because I've just not motivated myself to actually listen to it while I'm driving, because I just don't really want to go to work in the morning. I'd rather sleep. So because I'm grumpy, I don't put it on. But Closed in Common Orbit by Becky Chambers is absolutely lovely, and I'm loving the way that the two main characters are almost like a parallel to each other. But don't read this if you haven't read book 1 because it will spoil you. But now I think I'm finally done with this wrap up. Let me know what you read during the month of November. Let me know if you've got big plans for December, because I know that I do. But thank you so much for watching this video. Come and chat to me down below in the comments. Leave me some purple hearts if you got this far in the video, and I will see you in my next one. Bye.